But Savitri's heart replied in the dim night, why should I strive with earth and yielding laws, or stave off death's inevitable hour? This surely is best, to pactize with my fate and follow close behind my lover's steps and pass through night from twilight to the sun, across the tenebrous river that divides the adjoining parishes of earth and heaven. The voice replied, is this enough, O Spirit? And what shall thy soul say when it wakes and knows the work was left undone for which it came?
Good morning. So we're reading in Book 7, the Book of Yoga, Canto 2, the Parable of the Search for the Soul. In the first canto of the book, Savitri had begun her married life with Satyavan in the hermitage. And she was carrying the foreknowledge of Satyavan's impending death in 1 year. And she was swaying between feelings of great love and happiness and grief of his impending death, which she was keeping secret within her own heart, not divulging this knowledge to Satyavan or his parents. Then in the beginning of Canto 2, which we started last time, Savitri during the night, awake beside her husband who's sleeping, hears a voice from the summit of her being calling her to wake up her soul. It questions her. Why camest thou to this dumb, death-bound earth, this ignorant life beneath indifferent skies, tied like a sacrifice on the altar of time? It calls her, O Spirit, O immortal energy, if 'twas to nurse grief in thy helpless heart, or with hard, tearless eyes await thy doom. It calls her, arise, O soul, and vanquish time and death. But Savitri, at first, rebels against the voice. She doesn't feel within herself the strength, the ability to confront this doom of her husband, to confront death. She says, what need have I, what need has Satyavan to avoid the black meshed net, the dismal door, or call a mightier light into life's closed room, a greater law into man's little world? Why should I strive with earth's unyielding laws, or stave off death's inevitable hour? So the mother has beautifully read these lines. The voice replies to Savitri's rebellious heart, is this enough, O Spirit? And what shall thy soul say when it wakes and knows the work was left undone for which it came? Or is this all for thy being born on earth, charged with a mandate from eternity, a listener to the voices of the years, a follower of the footprints of the gods, to pass and leave unchanged the old dusty laws? So that is where we left off last time. And we'll begin from there. Would you like to read? Okay.
Which line? It's line 30.
I don't have the line number. Shall there be no tables?
64.
64. Okay. Charge will be mended from eternity. A listener to the voices of the years, a follower of the footprints of the gods, to pass and leave unchanged the old dirty laws. Shall there be no new tables, no new war, no greater light come down upon the earth, delivering her from her unconsciousness, man's spirit from unalterable fate. Canto not down to open the doors of fate, the iron doors that seemed forever closed, and lead man to truth's wide and golden road that runs through finite things to eternity. If this then the report that I must make, my head bowed with shame before the eternal seat, his power he kindled in thy body has failed. His laborer returns, her task undone. Then Savitri's heart fell mute, it spoke no word, but holding back her troubled rebel heart, abrupt, erect, and strong, calm like a hill, surmounting the siege of mortal ignorance. Its peak immutable, above mind's air, a power within her answered through still voice.
Let's just pause there. So this voice has the knowledge of Savitri's mission on earth, which he briefly describes here, that she shall bring new tables of law, of rules to govern the manifestation. No new word, no greater light come down upon the earth, delivering her from her unconsciousness, man's spirit from unalterable fate. This is what she's come to do. Earlier, when Sri Aurobindo had introduced this voice at the beginning, near the beginning of the canto, he said, "It seemed to come from inaccessible heights and yet was intimate with all the world and knew the meaning of the steps of time and saw eternal destinies changeless scene filling the far prospect of the cosmic gaze." So he introduces the voice in that way, that it's a omniscient voice, all-knowing, knowing the whole steps of time and destiny. And it knows Savitri's mission.
Would this suggest that everyone gets their mission told to them in some way, so that they know what they have to do and then they have to make a choice?
I think that it may also come up later that if we go deep within the soul, if we enter into the soul as the voice will command Savitri to do, then we can find that knowledge that each of us has a mission, a role to play in the manifestation. but that knowledge is hidden from us, our surface mind and consciousness, within the depths of our being, within our soul, psychic being. So there that knowledge comes. Here it is coming from above, from the summits of her being. But I don't think we can expect necessarily that we'll get that command from the summits of our being. But we can seek it within, as it will instruct Savitri to do. And she has a special mission, because she is here, as he says, to open the doors of fate, the iron doors that seemed forever closed, and lead man to truth's wide and golden road that runs through finite things to eternity. So she's an incarnation of the Divine Mother, here to create this new road through time. So now, at this last call of the voice, Savitri replies. Her heart fell mute, and at first spoke no word. And she held back her rebel heart. And then, abrupt, erect, and strong, calm like a hill, surmounting the seas of mortal ignorance, its peak immutable above mind's air, a power within her answered the still voice. So we'll continue.
I am thy portion here, charged with thy work, as thou myself seated forever above. Speak to my depths, O great and deathless voice. Command, for I am here to do thy will. The voice replied, Remember why thou camest. Find out thy soul, recover thy hid self. In silence, seek God's meaning in thy depths. Then mortal nature change to the divine. Open God's door, enter into his trance. Cast thought from thee, that nimble ape of light. In his tremendous hush, stilling thy brain, his vast truth wake within and know and see. Cast from thee sense that veils thy spirit's sight. In the enormous emptiness of thy mind, thou shalt see the Eternal's body in the world. Know him in every voice heard by thy soul. In the world's contacts meet his single touch. All things shall fold thee into his embrace. Conquer thy heart's throbs. Let thy heart beat in God. Thy nature shall be the engine of his works. Thy voice shall house the mightiness of his word. Then shalt thou harbor my force and conquer death.
Thank you. This is one of the very powerful mantric passages in Savitri, which summarizes, in a sense, the sadhana of Savitri. It's instructing her how to proceed, to find, the first line, remember why thou camest. And it's a message for all of us. Remember why thou have come to this earth, this death-bound earth. Find out thy soul. Recover thy hid self. Normally we're confined to this outer consciousness of the mind and the vital and the physical. And we don't really know our true being, which is hid from us, our true self, which is in the soul. Find out thy soul, recover thy hid self in silence. Seek God's meaning in thy depths. So that's the entryway into our hid self. It's in our depths. And we have to enter there in silence, quieting the mind and the vital emotions and desires, quieting all of that down, and seeking for God's meaning, our particular mission on earth, the reason for our existence. And once we find our soul deep within, then mortal nature change to the divine. It's really the role of the soul, the psychic being, to change the outer nature, to divinize the being. The soul, too, has descended into this world, into the ignorance, in order to change and transform it. So the voice further says, open God's door, enter into his trance. Just to go deep within, in a silence of the consciousness, into a kind of trance, an absolute stillness of the being, and to cast thought from thee, to throw away thoughts that come into your mind, that nimble ape of light. It's like a very dexterous imitator of the light, of the supreme light. It imitates it. So, throwing away thoughts from thee, in his tremendous hush, stilling thy brain, his vast truth wake within, and know and see. It's in that silence of the mind that the true knowledge can come. That we wake up to the true knowledge and vision of the divine. It's not in the thoughts. The thoughts only cover it over. And not only thought, cast from thee sense that veils thy spirit's sight. Our senses also cover over the vision and knowledge of the soul, of the true being within us. Our senses of outer vision and hearing, taste and touch, smell. In the enormous emptiness of thy mind, thou shalt see the Eternal's body in the world, know him in every voice heard by thy soul. In the world's contacts, meet his single touch. All the senses will be transformed when enlightened by the soul. They'll all become contacts of the divine. All things shall fold thee into his embrace. All that we sense outwardly will just feel and look as if the divine is embracing us everywhere. And then conquer thy heart's throbs. Let thy heart beat in God. This is not simply the throbbing of the physical heart, but of the emotional heart, of the emotions of joy and sadness and fear and grief. Conquer those, surmount those emotions. Then thy nature shall be the engine of his works. Thy voice shall house the mightiness of his word. Then shalt thou harbor my force and conquer death. So once she is able to achieve this union with her soul, then she will find the strength to conquer death, which it has been commanding her to do. So we continue.
Then Savitri by her doomed husband sat, still rigid in her golden, motionless pose, a statue of the fire of the inner sun. In the black night, the wrath of storm swept by. The thunder crashed above her, the rain hissed, its million footsteps patterned on the roof. Impassive, mid the movement and the cry, witness of the thoughts of mind, the moods of life, she looked into herself and sought for her soul. A dream disclosed to her the cosmic past, the crypt seed and the mystic origins, the shadowy beginnings of world fate. A lamp of symbol lighting hidden truth, imaged to her the world's significance. In the indeterminate formlessness of self, creation took its first mysterious steps. It made the body shape a house of soul, and matter learned to think, and person grew. She saw space peopled with the seeds of life, and saw the human creature born in time.
Thank you. Let's pause. So for a moment, we return to the outer scene, see Savitri sitting in her trance beside her husband, still rigid in her golden, motionless pose, a statue of the fire of the inner sun. Earlier, he had described her as the voice touched her body, became a stark and rigid golden statue of motionless trance, a stone of God lit by an amethyst soul. So he recalls that image of her like a statue. But here, a statue of the fire of the inner sun. And this fire is probably representing the fire of Agni, which also is connected with the soul and the psychic being. From the soul, this fire of aspiration rises towards the divine, towards unity with the divine. It's a fire of the inner sun, of the inner divine. And then Sri Aurobindo returns to the weather, symbolic of the inner state of being, so still, The wrath of the storm swept by, and the thunder crashed above her, and the rain hissed. But she is now a witness of the thoughts of mind, the moods of life. And she looked into herself and sought for her soul. Following the voice's command, now she seeks within her. And then it begins by a dream disclosing to her the cosmic past. So it's going to describe the whole evolutionary beginnings, and as the evolution proceeded through its various stages. And for her, it's a symbolic dream of this evolution. And in this first part, he gives us an overview of it, a brief synopsis, which he'll go into in greater detail. So first, she sees the crypt seed and the mystic origins, the shadowy beginnings of world fate. So she sees from the very beginning, from the crypt seed. A crypt is kind of a secret chamber that is maybe in a temple, in which the relics may be held. It's a secret place. And here it's a seed. It's from that deep origin of things from which the evolution has arisen. It's still shadowy. Can't be seen in its clarity. But now a lamp of symbol lighting, hidden truth, imaged to her the world's significance. And then, in the beginning, in the indeterminate formlessness of self. So that's where the creation arises from. An undetermined, unclear, unfixed formlessness of self, creation took its first mysterious steps. It arises out of that formlessness, and out of that formlessness it made the body shape, a house of soul. A place in which the soul could dwell. And then this outer body, the shape, matter, learned to think, and person grew. So this outer form develops over the course of the evolution. Eventually, it begins to think, and an individual being developed, grew. And then she saw space peopled with the seeds of life, and saw the human creature born in time. So he gives us a quick overview up to the human level, and then he'll go back to the beginning again and go into it in greater detail. So we'll continue.
At first appeared a dim half-neutral tide of being emerging out of infinite naught. A consciousness looked at the inconscient vast, and pleasure and pain stirred in the insensible void. All was the deed of a blind world energy. Unconscious of her own exploits, she worked, shaping a universe out of the inane. In fragmentary beings, she grew aware, a chaos of little sensibilities, gathered round a small ego's pinpoint head. In it, a sentient creature found its poise. It moved and lived, a breathing, thinking whole, on a dim ocean of subconscient life. A formless surface, consciousness awoke. A stream of thoughts and feelings came and went. A foam of memories hardened and became a bright crust of habitual sense and thought, a seat of living personality, and recurrent habits mimicked permanence. Mind nascent labored out a mutable form. It built a mobile house on shifting sands, a floating isle upon a bottomless sea.
Thank you. Let's pause there. So he begins by describing the very beginnings of being emerging out of infinite naught, out of nothingness. And he describes it first as a dim, half-neutral tide. It's as if there's just some kind of maybe movement, vibration, back and forth or something. And out of that movement, being emerges. And then a consciousness looked at the inconscient vast. So some consciousness awakens in that being that's emerging, and it's looking around at the inconscient vast around it. And then pleasure and pain stirred in the insensible void. At first, this naught, this void of emptiness is insensible. It has no sense of, no feeling. But then out of that, pleasure and pain begin to stir, to move. We had talked about this in the book of Fate, it was explained that these were described as the tenebrous twins, pain and pleasure, that emerged. But pain, he said, had to come first and plow the way for joy to come. So here they're just emerging out of the insensible void. So all was the deed, the action of a blind world energy. So there's just this cosmic force that's working, but it's unconscious. It's just force. Unconscious of her own exploits, she worked, of her own achievements, of her own deeds, shaping a universe out of the inane. The inane also is another word for the emptiness of the cosmos. So this force begins to work, emerge, and it operates seemingly unconscious, yet it's holding within itself consciousness, hidden, because it operates quite infallibly as it emerges and consciousness wakes in it. So in fragmentary beings, she grew aware. So now this force becomes aware. In fragmentary beings, in little points of the self, in little individualities, a chaos of little sensibilities gathered round a small ego's pinpoint head. So it's just many small little individualities of sense, feeling are beginning to awaken. And in those little sensibilities, a sentient creature found its poise. So from those first little egos of sense, a sentient creature emerges, a conscious creature. It moved and lived a breathing, thinking whole. So now conscious beings are awaking on a dim ocean of subconscious life. A formless surface consciousness awoke. A stream of thoughts and feelings came and went. A foam of memories hardened and became a bright crust of habitual sense and thought. So there's this stream of thoughts and feelings, this movement on the surface of a vast ocean of subconscious life. And on the surface, among this stream of thoughts and feelings, there forms a foam of memories. Just like on the surface of the ocean, you might see a foam develop, especially if there's a little pollution or some life there. It hardened and became a bright crust of habitual sense and thought, a seat of living personality, and recurrent habits mimicked permanence. So this is how the personality develops, out of these habits of sense. The same feelings, the same sensations recurring over and over again become habitual, and that forms the seat of personality. Somewhere Sri Aurobindo talks about our own being, our own surface consciousness, as being like just this kind of mass of habitual sensations and thoughts. We too are similar in that respect. We have these same thoughts and feelings that recur in us, and that becomes the seat of our personality. That's what we think is ourselves. Identify with those thoughts and feelings that keep recurring. We form some mental thought or image of our own being, and that becomes our sense of self, our ego. But it's just a thought, a feeling that becomes hardened as it recurs. It mimicked permanence. That sense of ego is not our true self. It's only pretending to be. It only feels like it's permanent, but it's not. Actually, it's always changing. Mind nascent, newly born, labored out a mutable form, worked out a changing form. It built a mobile house on shifting sands, a floating isle upon a bottomless sea. So he's describing this egoistic self, this individuality, that it's mutable, it's a mutable form, but it seems like a mobile house. We dwell in that sense of self on shifting sands. Still, it's not completely stable. And it can change. It can be swept away. It can undergo death. A floating isle upon a bottomless sea. The sea is this vast of life, unconsciousness, on which this being has formed. This ego has formed. And all of that is below it. It rests on that bottomless sea. Continue.
A conscious being was by this labor made. It looked around it on its difficult field. In the green, wonderful, and perilous earth, it hoped in a brief body to survive, relying on matter's false eternity. It felt a Godhead in its fragile house. It saw blue heavens, dreamed immortality. A conscious soul in the inconscience world, hidden behind our thoughts and hopes and dreams. an indifferent master signing nature's acts, leaves the vicegerent mind a seeming king. In his floating house upon the sea of time, the regent sits at work and never rests. He is a puppet of the dance of time. He is driven by the hours, the moment's call, compels him with the thronging of life's need and the babble of the voices in the world. This mind no silence knows, nor dreamless sleep. In the incessant circling of its steps, thoughts read forever through the listening brain. It toils like a machine and cannot stop.
Thank you. So we see at the end of that paragraph the human being emerging in its evolution. A conscious being was by this labor made, and it looked around it on its difficult field in this green, wonderful, and perilous earth. It hoped in a brief body to survive, relying on matter's false eternity. It felt a Godhead in its fragile house. It saw blue heavens, dreamed immortality. So that's mankind, hoping to live, to survive, relying on the body, its false eternity. But within it feels maybe something else, something eternal. It felt the Godhead in its fragile house, its fragile body and life. It looked up, saw the blue heavens, and dreamed of immortality. And then the narrative changes to the soul within this fragile house. A conscious soul in the inconscious world, hidden behind our thoughts and hopes and dreams. So this is the soul covered over by the mind and life and body, hidden, an indifferent master signing nature's acts, leaves the vicegerent mind a seeming king. So the soul within allows the outer mind to rule the nature, to operate in its stead. A master signing nature's acts. It gives the sanction for nature and for the mind to act as they will. It allows them. So it's not taking control over the outer nature yet. In his floating house upon the sea of time, the regent sits at work and never rests. This regent is the outer mind that controls, directs the lives of human beings. But this mind is always working, always movement, always thoughts coming and going, and it never rests. It's a puppet of the dance of time. Actually, all thoughts are flowing into the mind from outside, influencing us. We're not aware of all of that movement, those currents of thought coming and going. He's driven by the hours, the moments call. Compels him with the thronging of life's need. We're moved by the moment, the moment's need. We respond continually to all these knocks at our door. Do this, do that, you have to take care of this. This is life, the thronging of life's need. This crowding of needs and desires constantly compelling us, knocking at our mind's door, seeking relief. And the babble of the voices of the world, this confusing sound or voices of the world telling us what to do. This mind no silence knows, nor dreamless sleep. Even in sleep, the mind continues this constant movement, agitation, coming and going of thoughts. There's no rest. Only for a very brief few minutes in sleep we may find some absolute quietude. In the incessant, unceasing circling of its steps, thoughts tread forever through the listening brain. It toils like a machine and cannot stop. It's kind of a devastating description of our human mind. So it continues.
Into the body's many storied rooms, endless crowd down the dream god's messages. All is 100-toned murmur and babble and stir. There is a tireless running to and fro, a haste of movement and a ceaseless cry. The hurried servant senses answer apace to every knock upon the outer doors. Bring in time's visitors, report each call. Admit the 1,000 queries and the calls, and the messages of communicating minds, and the heavy business of unnumbered lives, and all the 1,000-fold commerce of the world. Even in the tracts of sleep is scant repose. He mocks life's steps in strange subconscient dreams. He strays in a subtle realm of symbol scenes. His night with thin air visions and dim forms. He packs or peoples with slight drifting shapes, and only a moment spent in silent self.
Thank you. It begins into the body's many storied rooms. Endless crowd down the dream god's messages. So he's describing the human consciousness like a many-storied building, many different levels of the consciousness, from the higher mind going up towards the spirit and down into the rooms of life and desire, down into the subconscious. So that's the many stories of our consciousness, and into that endless crowd down the dream god's messages, the messages of the higher levels of mind come down. But as they come down, they may be changed, distorted by the lower levels. All is 100-toned murmur and babble and stir. There's this action going on all the different levels of our being. In the higher mind, we may be getting messages. Our own minds may be thinking things, or thoughts may be coming into it from outside, or from our vital nature. Various desires or emotions may be arising, mixing with these thoughts. The senses, the hurried servant senses, answer apace. They respond to this movement of thought, to every knock upon the outer doors. Bring in time's visitors, report each call. The senses are continually alert to what's happening outside, bringing in the information from the world around us. They report each of these visitors, these sensations that it's receiving from outside to the mind. They admit the 1,000 queries and the calls, the questions and calls from outside, and the messages of communicating minds, and the heavy business of unnumbered lives. The unnumbered lives, I think of those around us, these other pinpoint egos, and all the 1,000-fold commerce of the world. All of these egos, these points of consciousness, are in interaction with one another. They're all communicating their thoughts and messages to each other. They're all putting demands, calls on ourselves, asking for this, for that. And then again, he describes the tracks of sleep, where there is scant repose, very little true rest. The mind continues in sleep. It mocks life's steps in strange subconscious dreams. It kind of imitates the activities of the life in subconscious dreams. We may stray in a subtle realm of symbol scenes. The consciousness can move about into the various planes of being, into the vital realms. His night with thin air visions and dim forms he packs, or peoples with slight drifting shapes. So these are our dreams. We see these drifting shapes and forms, and only a moment spends in silent self. Sri Aurobindo and the mothers say that typically we will go to the summit of our being and rest. And those few moments that we have in the silent self really is what gives us our rest. So we'll continue.
Adventuring into infinite mind space, he unfolds his wings of thought in inner air, or traveling in imagination's car, crosses the globe, journeys beneath the stars, to subtle worlds takes his ethereal course, visits the gods on life's miraculous peaks, communicates with heaven, tampers with hell. This is the little surface of man's life. He is this, and he is all the universe. He scales the unseen. His depths dare the abyss. A whole mysterious world is locked within. Unknown to himself, he lives a hidden king. Behind rich tapestries, in great secret rooms, an epicure of the spirit's unseen joys. He lives on the sweet honey of solitude, a nameless God in an unapproachable fane. In the secret aditum of his inmost soul, he guards the being's covered mysteries beneath the threshold, behind shadowy gates, or shut in vast cellars of inconscient sleep.
Thank you. So the mind is more free. It can adventure far into the future, into the past, around. It can imagine all different possibilities. So he's describing that greater possibility of the mind, crosses the globe, journeys beneath the stars, and then it can also explore the subtle realms, the inner realms of consciousness. To subtle worlds takes his ethereal course, visits the gods on life's miraculous peaks, communicates with heaven, tampers with hell. There are the greater possibilities of our mental consciousness. And he says, this is the little surface of man's life. He is this, and he is all the universe. He scales the unseen, his depths dare the abyss. So earlier he had described the body's many storied rooms. So these are all the different levels of being that we have within us that scale up to the unseen and that go down into the abyss. A whole mysterious world is locked within. We hold all of this, all these worlds within us, all these worlds that were described in Aswapati's inner journey in the first half of the book. And then, unknown to himself, he lives a hidden king. Now he's describing the soul, the psychic being, behind rich tapestries, in great secret rooms, an epicure of the spirit's unseen joys. An epicure is someone who cultivates a refined taste for the spirit's unseen joys. He lives on the sweet honey of solitude. This is the soul within, hidden within, behind all this outer action of the mind and the life and the body. A nameless God in an unapproachable fane. I think a fane is like a shrine or a temple, small temple. In the secret adytum of his inmost soul. And this is the innermost part of a temple. There, in the innermost part of our being, our inmost soul, guard the being's covered mysteries. Beneath the threshold, behind shadowy gates, or shut in vast cellars of inconscient sleep. It may seem as if it's hidden in the darkness. We might have to pass through that darkness to find our soul. It seems inconscient, but it's awake, it's alive, but it's deep hidden within. So we read one more.
The Immaculate Divine, all-wonderful, cast into the ardent purity of his soul, his splendor and his greatness and the light of self-creation in time's infinity as into a sublimely mirroring glass. Man in the world's life works out the dreams of God. But all is there, even God's opposites. He is a little front of nature's works, a thinking outline of a cryptic force. All she reveals in him that is in her, her glories walk in him and her darkness. Man's house of life holds not the gods alone. There are occult shadows, there are tenebrous powers, inhabitants of life's ominous neither rooms. A shadowy world's stupendous denizens. A careless guardian of his nature's powers, man harbors dangerous forces in this house. The Titan and the Fury and the Jinn lie bound in the subconscious cavern pit, and the beast grovels in his entree den. Dire mutterings rise and murmur in their drowse.
Thank you. Let's pause there. He begins by describing the soul, what it is, the immaculate, divine, all-wonderful, casts into the argent purity of his soul his splendor and his greatness and the light of self-creation in time's infinity, as into a sublimely mirroring glass. So the divine bliss, the divine all-wonderful, casts into the soul his purity, his splendor, and his greatness. All is there in the soul, as if a mirror of the divine. And the light of self-creation in time's eternity. Even the whole expanse of time and space, the unfolding of the evolution is there in the soul, reflected there. Man in the world's life works out the dreams of God. All these possibilities that are there in the divine being are then worked out in the soul, by the soul. And then he speaks again of all the heights and depths are there reflected in the being, even God's opposites. All she reveals in him that is in her. Her must be referring to nature's works, or the mother, I'm not sure. Her glories walk in him and her darknesses. Man's house of life holds not the gods alone. There are occult shadows. There are tenebrous powers, inhabitants of life's ominous nether rooms. There's deeper underground rooms in the subconscious. A shadowy world, stupendous denizens. Denizens are foreign inhabitants. So these beings live there in our occult depths, in our subconscious depths. And man is like a careless guardian. He doesn't take care, he's not aware of all of this that lives within him. These beings in the shadows of his being, he's not aware of them. He's careless. Man harbors dangerous forces in his house. The Titan and the Fury and the Jinn. These are like the Asura and Rakshasa. And the Jinn, this is a Muslim reference to kind of invisible beings invisible spirits who take form in people or animals. But they're all kind of hostile beings, we could say. They lie bound in the subconscious cavern pit, and the beast grovels in his den, his cave. Dire mutterings rise and murmur in their drowse. Terrible, fearful mutterings rise up from the depths of our being. So all of this is within us. He's going to describe these beings in the underworld in much greater detail as we go. So all of this can rise up in us and in our world. All is there. But also the gods are there. So we'll stop there for today.
Savitri's heart fell mute. It spoke no word. A power within her answered the still voice. I am thy portion here, charged with thy work, as thou myself seated forever above. Speak to my depths, O great and deathless voice. Command, for I am here to do thy will.
Thanks to Sri Aurobindo.